Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I am your podcast host, Danny Vicente, and this is Coffee and Conversations, a place where we explore topics in technology, leadership, and innovation. Discussions about things that are keeping you up at night with industry experts, technology experts, and so much more. So grab your cup of coffee and join us as we dive in. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Welcome to another episode of Coffee and Conversations. If you were with us last week, then you are going to recognize all the faces and all the voices on today's podcast as they are coming around for round two of a conversation we're having within retail. In fact, if you missed last week's podcast, please go listen to it now. It'll be linked. It's linked. You can see it or it's down below. Please go watch it. But in the meantime, here's a quick snippet of what we talked about last week.
Mark mentioned you can have, what if you had the kind of seasoned retail manager sitting up on the shelf looking at who's coming in the store, observing and so on. Yes, in theory, you could have a team of 1,000 people who are all with kind of clipboards, kind of, noting down everything and furiously putting it together and getting the math horribly wrong, right? Okay, because that's what we do under pressure. What if you could, in an autonomous way, measure the changes that you make in store? That level of qualitative detail. This isn't just around do more with less people, get that same quantitative output. There is a richness. There's a richness to this which you only get from being able to do this at a very granular level.
Okay, and now we're going to jump back into it. I am going to let everybody reintroduce themselves just so that you can recognize the voice when you hear it if you're on audio only. So David, we'll start with you. If you could introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and where you're from.
Thanks very much, Danny. So my name is David Owens. I'm the CEO and founder of EVERYANGLE. EVERYANGLE are a computer vision technology partner of Cisco.
Love it. Mark, go for it.
And Mark Scanlon, I am the global industry lead for retail here at Cisco.
Fantastic. And if you guys thought we'd skip her, we never do. My fabulous co-host.
Thanks, all. Thanks for tuning in. Sabrina Gonzalez and Mark's partner in crime, as always. So marketing manager on the retail side.
I love it. I love it. You know what I realized in the moment here as you guys were introducing yourself? I never introduced myself with my name. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to see how long it takes before people start asking down below, who the hell are you? All right, guys. Let's jump into it and let's continue to talk in the retail world. And we're going to ask a pretty basic question. And that is, what is shrinkage?
Who is that hot potato being thrown to? Is it going to Mark first? Is it going to me? Is it just a free-for-all?
It's a free-for-all. I want to see who's got the most passion to jump in there and start talking right out the gate.
Oh, Dave's full of passion. Go for it, Dave.
Go for it, Dave.
I like the way he's injecting some competition in there straight out of the gate, right? Okay. No pressure on anyone. So shrinkage really relates to every different aspect of fraud, theft, and unintended wastage that can happen relating to product in a retail setting. So that can be at checkout, that can be customer theft, that can be employee fraud or employee assisted fraud at checkout. There's a term for that called sweethearting, right? Which, if the employee knows a customer, they're a friend, family member, partner in crime, and they only scan one of the three stakes, right, that are going across the till. Theft, obviously, I think it's self-checkout. Somebody has 5 items in the basket, they only scan 4. They deliberately don't scan the 5th most expensive item. So that's all stuff at checkout. Then you've got a second category, shelf edge. So that is effectively taking the item off the shelf and sticking it up underneath the kind of sweatshirt or behind the jacket, kind of shoplifting, as it's called sometimes. And then you also have receivables theft. There's other terms for that as well, but basically theft of goods before they even arrive in the warehouse or stock room. And then the other category that comes in under shrink is wastage. So product effectively that is, think of a product that is spoiled, it's broken, it's dropped in transportation. They would be the main categories included in shrink. unless our partner here, Mark, would like to add anything to that.
Go on, I will add one, Dave. Returns fraud. If an associate or a cohort, but typically an associate is standing at the customer service desk, there's nobody around, and they turn around, pick up an item that's already been returned, scan it for a cash return, put the item back, and put the cash in the pocket. That can actually be significant. There was one grocery store in the news, I think about a year ago, where one individual returned fraudulently nearly $1 million of product in a grocery store. I mean, how the heck do you do that? It can be a significant loss. The other piece is you're not just losing the revenue from these items. In cases where the item is being taken from the store without payment, you're losing the revenue and the product itself. But you're also impacting the inventory accuracy. So something's leaving the store, it hasn't been scanned. Now you think you got one more on the shelf than you have. Conversely, with the returns fraud, you've returned something that hasn't actually been sold. So now you've increased the inventory count, and it really hasn't been returned. So there's multiple aspects to where that loss is occurring. You've got the product, you've got the revenue, but you've also got the inventory inaccuracies that can lead to all sorts of other downstream effects.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And actually, I'm sure we'll get into it in a bit, but also just thinking of it at checkout, typically, you could argue whether you box this out into its own category, but you also have loyalty card and prepaid card activation fraud as well. So again, there's a number of examples of where retail associates will actually collect the loyalty points that should be going to customers. They'll put that all on a card, on a single card, which will then use to convert for monetary benefit. Or if you're looking at prepaid cards, any kind of gift card, voucher card you might commonly have at checkout, fraudulently activating those, selling them, they're highly monetizable very quickly. And that's a growing issue. It typically happens at checkout, so it's normally lumped in under that category, but you could argue it's its own category.
Wow. So this is not a playbook on how to learn to do loss or to steal from these places, but
it sounds like it. But
I just learned so many different ways. I thought, well, I would have never thought about. Bad people have their mind in the wrong place, I suppose. Okay, so when we're talking about loss prevention, there's an obvious aspect to the camera, which is, I know what we discussed last one. We're talking about camera here, but I know, David, you've talked often that these cameras don't get reviewed. So I'd like you to touch on exactly what that means. What is going on there from that perspective?
Well, I think if I take one step back for a moment, the other thing I'd add in here is to say that on average, when we're talking around shrink as a whole, it will vary, but on average, it's around 3% of gross revenue. And there will be some retailers who will listen to this and say, no, my shrink is a lot less than that. There'll be other retailers who will say, I wish my shrink was only 3%. And the majority of retailers will say, I don't really know what my shrink is, aside from doing an annual stock take at the end. So there's just knowing actually how big is the problem. Are you able to measure it? Right. So that's just one aspect. And it's also a growing problem. I know we're gonna get to talking about that. But I think what was useful when Mark and I were breaking this out into different categories is at every angle in terms of using Cisco Meraki MV smart cameras and computer vision, we focus on the area of shrink that pertains to checkout. So we're looking at cameras over checkout. Now, why are we doing that? Well, typically speaking, you're looking at one camera per checkout. And we're going to talk in a couple of minutes around the specific different types of theft and fraud that can happen at checkout. Suffice to say, there's multiple different types, all of which we can actually help address through a ratio of 1 camera per checkout lane. So if you're thinking around the density of camera that's required, the capex that's required, you can retire and deliver a very, very high ROI relative to the investment. If you look at something like shelf edge theft, if you think about it just in a big box grocery store, say you've even got 10, 12 checkout lanes. Well, you need 10, 12 cameras, right, to cover those checkout lanes. And the math on it generally is that if shrink as a whole accounts for around 3% of gross revenues, it's around about a third or 1% happens at checkout, 1% happens at shelf edge, and 1% happens elsewhere. And if you think about that, big box grocery retail store, lots of square footage, to try and detect and address for shelf edge theft, you need to have near full camera visibility of the entire floor area. And if that's a large retailer, that equals an awful lot of cameras. There's absolutely value in trying to solve for that, but it's a higher capex. So we focus on trying to deliver those quick wins, those where you have multiple use cases at checkout. So that's maybe just the first thing to say. We're really focused on checkout, theft, and fraud. Building on that, it's very common, right? Very, very common that most retailers, whether we're talking around grocery, whether it's textiles, fashion, whether it's value, premium, or luxury, most often than not, there will be a CCTV camera that will be at checkout. You'll see it at the cash wrap, at the checkout. But the fun fact, and I think we mentioned this on the last podcast, but it's good to go and restate it, less than 0.1 of 1% of all of the CCTV video footage that is recorded is ever reviewed by a human being. And you've got over 1.1 billion CCTV devices deployed currently, and that's going to more than double in the next 26 months or so. So you think about it, you've got more and more storage in higher fidelity, greater resolution, these oceans of data that's happening, and like so much of it is just never being watched, never being viewed. So really, the kind of when you get to the guts or the core of the proposition here, the proposition is, well, instead of just using a dumb CCTV camera to record video that no one's going to go and look at because you don't have the people to look at it and they don't have the time, why not actually install a camera that can act as a smart sensor? And why not use that smart sensor for computer vision workloads that can autonomously do a lot of this detection for you, which saves the need for lots of people doing lots of mundane work. You're already going to invest in having a CCTV camera anyway. Is there some additional cost in taking the next step in investment for camera as a sensor? Sure, there is. But so too, the actual ROI and payback you're going to get is multiple and actually can address problems and you can lean on budgets that exist across multiple different line of business functions within the retail organization. Mark, yeah. any thoughts to build on that?
Absolutely spot on. And particularly when you start layering up the capabilities, going beyond a single function, then it becomes even more interesting. You're saying about spreading the cost across multiple lines of business, but you're also magnifying the ROI that's coming out of it. So I think it's a phenomenal opportunity to address a very significant issue in retail, as well as driving other benefits from that after the fact.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the problem isn't even that, right, David? I know that you kind of shared another stat that we love was that it was like $100 billion problem, and not only that, right? But it continues to grow. There's a percentage that continues to grow yearly. And going alongside that, teams, right, that are covering the security space or just the security org in a retailer, they're actually shrinking. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the first thing I think I'd say about that, Sabrina, was I was doing homework with my 8-year-old boy, right? And I got him to write out 100 billion as a number, right? And he kept on writing with the zeros. And he said, "Is that a real number?" And I was like, "Yeah, that is a real number." And the other aspect of that is $100 billion that has been taken from the bottom line of the retail industry,
Yep.
from the bottom line. So for every dollar that we are able to address out of that 100 billion, that is a dollar that is dropping straight to the bottom line of a retailer. Now, there are lots of computer vision use cases in terms of analytics, and we do some of those. Know more around your customer in store, all that kind of good stuff. But if we help a retailer generate an additional dollar in revenue, they will have a margin on that. And depending upon whether they're value, luxury, grocery, or textiles, it's going to vary. But let's just say it's going to vary somewhere between 7 and 20 points on the dollar. Okay. Now, it might be more or less than that, but the point is, it's not the whole dollar. Whereas tackling this issue of this 100 billion, that goes entirely to the bottom line. And to your point, Sabrina, it's growing every year around 5% to 6% per annum. And the teams that you mentioned there, the loss prevention investigation teams, whose purpose and mission it is to try and tackle this issue, 70% of those teams are either remaining static or shrinking in size, largely because of this pervasive labor shortage that we spoke about in the first podcast. So you kind of have this perfect storm, a growing problem, less people there to actually go and investigate it. So what do you do? What's the parameter that we adjust in the equation that actually allows retailers to reclaim some of this 100 billion, right? And the answer to that we're proposing is camera as a sensor with computer vision to eliminate the need for the human being to have to do everything as part of that loss prevention equation.
He was talking your language there, Sabrina. I loved seeing you chime in, and this is being in your wheelhouse. It was fantastic. So, folks, I'm going to remind you again, this is number 2 in our podcast series, and that link for number 1 is down below. So if you have not done so already, please go back and listen to that one. There's a lot of great information that leads right into the conversation we have. We do also have a number of links down below, so please go and visit those. And if you're having questions like I am, there's an Ask Us down below as well. So please submit those questions, and we will get it in front of these guys. And if you didn't listen to the last one, I promised that David would stay up all night responding. And so I'm going to let him off the hook this time. And Mark said he'll stay up all night answering your questions. So please do ask those questions and don't be shy.
I love the way, Danny, you agree all of these things in advance. You don't just like kind of catch us on the fly.
No, it's not spur of the moment. You know,
so Dave, no plan survives contact with Danny.
I'm sure I have no idea what you're referencing there. Sabrina, I'm going to let you jump in because I could see that your wheels were turning and you had a follow-up question there, and I'm not going to stop you. So please continue.
I guess I was going to ask Mark, and this is more of that piece that not only, right, is that the $100 billion problem, but additional to that, like the cost of investigation for these. Would love to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I mean that comes back to the labor issue, or at least compounds it. So the cost of investigations is phenomenal. When you look at many retailers, many of them are still running old DVRs or NVRs. Maybe they don't have the bandwidth to access video over the wide area network. So they would actually have teams fly in, drive in, whatever it may be, to a location to look at the video and review it and determine, was there an issue and was there anything they could do about it. In many cases, they may not even do anything about it, honestly, even if they do review it, because the cost then of litigation after that is significant. So if you're not going to recover the cost of not only the goods that have gone walkabout, but also the cost of the investigation, and the lawyers, of course, and the lawyers. Why would you pursue that? So I think that's part of why many losses aren't even investigated. In fact, there's one QSR, and Dave, this may have been one you and I have talked about before. Is a QSR, a quick serve restaurant, who sees a lot of issues with voids, and it's kind of part of the sweethearting issue. My buddy comes in after the football game on a Friday night, orders a bunch of food, process it through the kitchen system, and then void the transaction. And it was such a pervasive issue, they set the threshold for alert at $70. That's a heck of a lot of burgers. So what they were finding was if they set the threshold any lower, they were just running around trying to put out fires the whole time. So they were willing to take the loss of $69.99 of food on a regular basis because that was lower than the cost of investigating and prosecuting. Crazy. Yeah. Was that that was you, Dave, right?
It was, and we, I think we've got several volumes, right, that we can write when we come to doing our memoirs on this. Some of I guess one of the most fascinating things is, when you're looking on the outside and what you would perceive or understand to be the level of capability that some of these huge organizations have versus when you're brought into the inner circle and you actually understand the level of capability they have in practice, the deficit, the delta between the two can really be quite shocking. Mm-hmm. Like you would think, and I'm not going to name any names here out of respect, but you would think retailers with a couple of thousand stores would have a suitably large loss prevention team. It would shock you. It would shock you to learn a retailer with 4,000 or 5,000 stores may have a loss prevention team of 12, 13 people.
Oh, wow.
I mean, how? The point is they have to very much pick their battles. We have one. There is one retailer, and their way of detecting whether they have staff fraud is they have a tip line that they hope other staff members will pick up the phone and call. And in fairness, some will do that out of a sense of, respect and honor and duty and so on. But it's kind of like throwing a penny into the fountain and making a wish, right? So one of the things that is a change up here, Mark was talking there, right, around various different issues that can impact, and looking at the QSR example where they're setting the threshold of $70 because they just don't have the time, they don't have the hours to be able to review everything underneath that. What that speaks to is the level of transaction coverage. Okay, so this is one of the permutations in there. If you have 1,000 transactions that's happening in a day, what is your loss prevention capability in terms of transaction coverage? Can you cover 1%, 5%, whatever the case may be? Part of the proposition around using smart camera as a sensor is to deliver 100% transaction coverage. Every single transaction is reviewed without exception. Now, when I say that to loss prevention teams, I kind of repeat it 2 or 3 times because you really need to let that sink in for what that means.
No, he must have said something else.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So that's a huge aspect there, increasing the transaction coverage. And then if we drill down into some specific use cases as examples, so one would be customer not present. So think around checking. And again, it's groceries, it's textiles, whatever the case may be. You have a void, a refund, a cash return, a gift card activation. There should always be a customer present when that is happening. So if we can inspect every single transaction by integrating the point of sale terminal transaction data with the video footage that is associated with that time and date period. So we now know the number of items that have been recorded on the point of sale. We now have video that is actually looking at that time period. And if any item on that transaction is flagged as a void, a refund, cash return, card activation, and we are monitoring 2 zones at the checkout, one for retail associate and one for customer, and we see there is no person present in the customer zone, and we review 100% of transactions, what we are then giving to the loss prevention team is the net total of events where there was no customer present, but the transaction category says there always should be. Now, instead of the customer arbitrarily saying, we're going to set the limit at $70 because we think that's a good guess and we don't have the capability to investigate anything more than that. Now what we're saying is, here's a list of the events and only the events that are suspicious and you need to look at. And what we've seen is that increases your transaction coverage to 100% and it decreases the time to investigate an event by 90%. Okay, so what you're doing is you're immediately increasing the investigation capability of each loss prevention investigator by 10x. And the time that they are spending is now focused on events that are surfaced from 100% coverage. Not to put too fine a note on it, the ROI on this is crazy, right? It is crazy big, crazy huge, and this is so simple to start. And it would be probably one of the first areas or places that I would encourage any retailer to start with. And at that checkout and with that camera, there's then multiple different use cases we can layer on top of that.
And actually, Dave, something else to call out, and I'll caveat by saying it varies from retail segment to retail segment, but typically 50 to 60% of losses have an associate component. Whether it's sweethearting or returns fraud or voids or the things Dave was just talking about with no customer present. What if you could address 50 to 60% of your losses in a store? That's just a phenomenal ROI, as Dave was saying.
And if we bring the math back on that, out of that $100 billion problem, we're saying that around a third of that is happening at checkout. So it's around $33 billion. And to Mark's point, that's all. That's all. Not as big a number, right, for my 8-year-old right time as the 100 billion. Okay. But of that 33 billion, to Mark's point, if you can address 50 to 60% of that, okay, we're now at 16, 17 billion dollars in addressable savings, all to the bottom line. And I appreciate we're throwing out really big numbers here, but the point on this is the math of this scales up, scales down. If you have one store with 2 checkouts, if you have 1,000 stores, you're going to find within the bell curve, 80% of retailers are underneath that curve, like plus or minus 1 standard deviation. So, you're relevant.
And the other piece with the associate components as well is, these days retailers, even if they were to actively detect a loss in progress with a consumer, generally most retailers have a do not engage policy because of personal risk that the associate will be assaulted or worse in the store. When it's an associate loss, you have all the power as a retailer. You can take action. Maybe it's retraining. To be fair, you're flagging these transactions. Maybe they didn't know some policy or whatever it may be. But for those that are, real losses, then you can take action against that individual. And realistically, in a store, it only takes one or two for word to get around that management is actually taking action, and your associate side loss will all but dry up.
And there's so much more to build on this, and I know we have a certain amount of time, but a couple of things to say on that. All of the research shows that when you do identify associate related fraud, that associate, typically speaking, you only ever uncover or identify around 1/3 of the total cost of the fraud that has actually been committed. So early identification and quick intervention. So if you think about that, one of the things that we offer as a result is you have a new retail associate who starts. The loss prevention team knows start dates. What they can then do is they can then pull up and review all of the transactions related to that associate where there were voids, refunds, etc. So it's a very targeted, programmatic effort where they can say, we're going to do this for the first, for example, 5 or 7 days of each new employee hire. So we identify if there are any bad apples and we weed them out very, very quickly. The other point that Mark mentioned there as well, which is true, is around unintentional loss. And we see that there is a lot of that. What I mean by that is you have a retail associate, and typically it's at man checkout. And it's typically where there's a large volume of items. It doesn't happen so much in premium or luxury fashion. It's more so with grocery. So, somebody's got 50 items like in a cart that's coming along, and you have a retail associate, and I don't know, there's a bag of peas. Okay, this is the 37th transaction the retail associate has done that day, and they try scanning that bag of peas 3 times and it does not register on the POS system. And they think to themselves, you know what? It's just a bag of peas. And they move it to the side. The problem around that is that equally word gets out on that as well. And that can cause, so there's very much a retraining opportunity to identify there. Mark's completely right. There is an absolute reticence to have a real-time intervention with customers where this is happening. And what we've seen for fear of attacks or altercations with frontline staff, and unfortunately, all of the data shows that is on the rise as well. But one of the things that you can do there is we got at the very beginning of the call, we were talking, or the podcast, we were talking around how big is this number for you as a retailer? What gets measured gets managed. How are you actually measuring this? So if you can understand the level of theft and fraud that is happening per store, per checkout lane, per retail associate, like time of day, day of week, and so on, what you can do then is a couple of things. One, we've had retailers will actually reduce the number of self-checkout lanes that are open because they know during these time periods, that's when they have most theft. So what they do is close that down, use the manned checkouts as a choke point. They force the transactions through that because they know there's a lower rate of theft that happens. Or equally at manned checkouts, when they know there's a higher rate of fraud, they simply position security guards or other management staff are on patrol. And oftentimes it doesn't take more than that. And the great thing is you're able to test and measure the effect of this.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to compare 1 week against the next. When you made that intervention, did it actually work? There's no guessing in this.
Love it. Just to remind everybody, I know I sound like a broken record, but we do have links down below. Please go and visit those. If you have not listened to the previous podcast, well, you're missing out. So go back and listen to that now. And lastly, ask all those questions, and let's keep Mark as busy as we can this evening.
Thanks.
All right. Well, guys, so one of the thoughts that came to my head, and we'll leave names out of it. In my previous life, when I worked in retail, one of the ways that was the most prevalent in as far as loss prevention is concerned is the associates knew the numbers. They knew them so well that when somebody would bring a product, they knew exactly what that total was. They would simply tell the customer, take the cash, and never actually insert a transaction. So we talked about this being something where we monitor the transactions to see where this is. What if a transaction is not logged? Where does that fall into this? And is this a solution that we have something for?
It's a really relevant question. It's a really, really relevant question. And yes, it does falls into the problem space, and it also therefore should and must fall into the solution space. We would call that would fall into either sweethearting, so associate assisted fraud, or also self-checkout theft. Now, I think the way I'm always conscious, and we did this in the first podcast as well, where should you start? If we conjure up the profile of, I'm a retailer, irrespective of what category, irrespective of what size, I'm currently not doing anything in this space. Where do I start? How do I get most day one value? And then how do I build on top of that? So I am going to come to answer that question. Absolutely, Danny, but I'm going to do it in a slightly roundabout way by kind of building this pyramid up, right, in terms of value. So the first place that I would say that you start at is you get a Meraki smart camera installed at each checkout lane. First two use cases that we look to detect for are customer not present, as we spoke about a few moments ago, detections of voids, refunds, etc., where there's no customer present. The second one that we look to detect at the exact same location using the same camera is associate not present, or sometimes referred to as basically for detecting whether skimming devices have been added to payment terminals, card payment terminals. So if you think about that, if you have an individual who is loitering beside a card payment terminal, there is no retail associate present, and there is no point of sale transaction that's actually in progress at that time. Well, why is that person there? And one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why they may be there is that they may be seeking to tamper with the card payment terminal. And that can have extremely dire consequences for retailers. And if you actually get down into the PCI compliance regulations for how you need to operate your card payment terminals, you'll see that there's an onus of responsibility on you as a retailer to be able to have evidence to show that skimming devices aren't being added. So that's the easiest place to start. That is like day one value. The second step that you build on top of that is then around recording the visual data for each individual point of sale transaction and being able to recall that on demand. Think around a central loss prevention team. There's, however many number of sites that they have. So we totally do away with the requirement to have to travel on site, to have to worry about whether a camera was even online or recording, to have to worry about retention time, right? What we're saying now is you can key in a transaction ID and you can pull back the video related to that transaction from any store, anywhere, for any time period, yesterday to 5 years ago. Okay. So what you're now doing is giving that complete visibility plane to your loss prevention team. And you can then do targeted investigations. Like we mentioned, you have a new retail associate, their first week, building a program in there where you review to identify, is there anything suspicious that's happening? After that, then what we want to go and build on is automated sweethearting detection and at manned checkout, and automated scan avoidance detection at self-checkout. And what I mean by that is, if you think around, and I'll just give an example in grocery, think around one of the traditional large grocery stores with a large checkout and a belt. You've got lots of different items being scanned. And we go back to, Danny, I'm going to use you as the victim here, right? So you're the perpetrator. You know the retail associate. You've got 3 high value items, be it liquor or be it meat or whatever the case may be. And the retail associate deliberately only scans one of those. And they take 2 of the items and they kind of feign as though it's actually moving over the scanner, but it's not. So what we're doing there is using the video from that transaction, we are using the machine learning algorithms to visually identify the objects and count the quantity. So we will say in this 60-second transaction, we visually counted 10 items. There were only 8 recorded on the point of sale system. There's a difference, generate an alert, and your loss prevention team are now investigating only that one transaction because it's been flagged, as opposed to having to trawl through every transaction to just stumble across that one by chance. Exact same use case at self-checkout, where you obviously don't have retail associates, but you have just customers. Same thing. You observe 10 items moving across, only 5 are actually scanned. There's a delta, generate the report. Sorry, Mark. You want to jump in?
No. And actually, you triggered a thought there, Dave. So there are also higher risk items. So we'll use Danny as the victim again. Danny, what do you think is the number one stolen item in a grocery store? And in the US, this is going to vary state to state because there are different restrictions. But in general,
at a grocery store,
yeah.
Oh, God, wow. I was going to say whatever's ready. I don't know. Drinks. I'm going to say a beer. A beer is my final answer.
Vodka.
I was close.
Yeah. So you could have the computer vision recognize bottles that look like vodka and see, is there a bottle of vodka on the receipt? And although Dave said it multiple times, I will call out, this whole thing requires integration with the point of sale. So we need access to the transaction logs. And I know, Dave, you've said that multiple times. I don't want anyone to think it's going to magically happen if we put in the camera. You do need that integration to be able to do the comparison of what the camera's seeing and what's actually hitting the T log or the receipt at the end of the transaction. So
this is, honestly, I could go on for hours about this, right? In terms of, there's so much to share, but so a couple of things. One of the largest retailers in the US incurs $3 million a year in loss on vodka. That's a lot of vodka.
That's a lot of vodka.
That's a lot of vodka. Okay, so this is not a small problem. Also, believe it or not, cigarettes. There's huge losses on cigarettes with associate related loss. Mark mentioned there around integration with POS systems. So one of the sneak previews that I will say kind of coming soon with the EVERYANGLE platform is native integrations with 2 of the largest POS vendors out there for retail. So that will magically integrate if you use that POS system. Now, we have a way of being able to do it really quite straightforwardly at the moment, but it does require some engagement. It does require, dotting some I's and crossing some T's. It's not hugely onerous, but nonetheless, having a native integration will be huge. And we'll make a lot of noise when we have that in place. But Mark is right. And the other thing I wanted to point out as well is your customer not present, associate not present, your assisted visual inspection. These are solutions that you can deploy on day one. They require no computer vision model training. It is important to note, right, in full transparency, because there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there when it comes to computer vision. In full transparency, if you are looking to build a model that will detect certain items, and those items might be specific to a particular retailer, that requires gathering a data set of images, and it requires retraining a model to detect those. And that's a process that can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Now, what we advocate there is you're going to be using the same smart cameras you've deployed at checkout. So deploy those cameras, get your day one benefits from those use cases that don't require any hard effort. And while we're gathering the images, then just as we're doing that in parallel, let's build the data set, let's train it so that you get these use cases on the top, but you're not trying to make a request to leadership in your organization. Please trust us, there'll be some value in 6 months' time. because that's difficult for retailers in the current climate.
Yeah.
Folks, I am going to remind you once again of the links down below and the Ask Us link down there as well. So please submit your questions. As is the case with our last podcast, as is this one, we've talked, I've been entertained, and when I looked up, all the time has disappeared. So we've come to the end of the podcast, and those that have listened before know what is coming on the end of the podcast. And the great news is the two gentlemen on the podcast also know what's coming. So I'm not asking that question. It's always keeping you on your toes. It's always keeping you on your toes. So here's my question for you both, because it is something, David, you alluded to this earlier, but it is something that I think I'm putting myself in the shoes of our customers. You mentioned there's customers that don't even know what their percentages are. There's customers that are tackling this and ad hoc. Where do you start? If I'm looking at this problem and I don't know, or if I'm looking at this problem and I kind of know, or I'm guessing, or let's just set it at 70 because I think that's an arbitrary number I can live with. Where do I start? What's the first thing that we should do, and where do I start? And I'll let you both answer that question because I would love to hear both responses.
Mark, do you want to go first?
I'll give you time to think. So I come back to my mantra of visibility, insights, and action. The first thing you've got to do is understand the size of the problem. The cameras provide the visibility, the AI model gives you the insights. Then you got to decide, once you know how big that problem is, assuming you have a problem, which every retailer does in this case, then what are you going to do about it? So I would say take that approach. Initially, deploy to learn, deploy to understand, and then take action based on that.
I love that.
I think that's extremely sound advice. I think two bits of context I'd bring in here. I think there's a whole chunk of retailers out there who have they've basically, they're just accepting that this is a problem that they can't really nudge the dial on, and
It's doing business.
It's almost a cost of business for doing that. And I think the first thing that I would say there is actually hope, right? there is actually something you can do about this. Yeah. And the other bit of context I'd add in there as well is I was speaking with a large retailer just 2 days ago, and we were talking about different use cases, both in terms of in-store analytics, understanding your customer better, and loss prevention. And what they said to me very clearly was, we are under pressure. Any project that we bring to leadership at the moment, we have to be able to give a very hard-nosed, dialed-on dollar value return within a time frame, because there's so much cost pressure on retailers every which way you look at. There's huge value in insights, don't get me wrong. But if you're looking for day one value, if you're looking for something, a solution, literally, that you can deploy, realistically, even if you're doing that at scale in lots of sites, you can get Meraki cameras on a try and buy program. You can get a camera shipped out within 2 days. Put your mind to it, you can get that installed easy within a week, even if you got to use a cabling contractor and you don't have that there. You get the software application deployed within minutes. So let's even take a realistic approach to this and say within a week. If you're listening to this today, within a week, you can actually start delivering bottom line savings to your organization. And if you're thinking about that, there's a real opportunity for you, if you're in the loss prevention team, to represent LP as the hero function within the business. So there's a functional benefit there, there's a business benefit. And I would encourage you, I would say, hey, if you've got 1 store, 1,000 stores, doesn't make a difference. Start with one checkout lane. One checkout lane, one camera, right? Start with that. That's simple. Nothing proves this out like eating your own dog food, right? Okay, so you got to just go deploy it, prove it. You will see the results, and that will be the business case that you need to bring to leadership, and all good things come from there. And that's what I'd recommend you do.
I love it. And folks, I often, you've heard me say this on other podcasts. I always say that Cisco and our partners are your partner as well. You're not in this alone. So please leverage our experience. You don't have to figure out the problem on your own. These gentlemen have seen a lot, and our companies have seen a lot, and we can help you out in whatever you're looking at. Thank you again for joining this podcast, David. Mark, thank you for your time. Once again, I learned more than I contributed to this podcast, but I appreciate you both. Folks, there are a bunch of links down below. Please do go visit them and feel free to ask us the question. I promise I won't bombard Mark alone, but we will eventually answer all questions we receive. Folks, thank you for joining us. Guys, thank you. Sabrina, thanks as always.
Thanks very much.
Thanks all.